Have you thought about becoming financially free through real estate investing, but don't have the time or knowledge to get started? Welcome to the Real Estate Cowboys podcast. Each week, we discuss passive income investment opportunities in the red-hot Texas market. John Larson and the Real Estate Cowboys will show you how to leverage their team to build wealth in real estate through passive investment opportunities. And now, here's John.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Cowboys. Today, we're talking property management, and I have 89 questions that you should ask every property management company before you hire them. And I know you're thinking to yourself, 89 questions? Wow, that's a lot. And why 89? Well, I just kind of ran out of questions at 89. But if you think that 89 questions is too much to ask, it's really not, because you have to keep in mind that to achieve that passive experience that you're looking for, to achieve a successful investment experience with your investment properties, your single family homes, your apartment complex, your whatever it may be. If property management is involved, if you are not managing it yourself, it is a very, very key aspect when it comes to owning a rental portfolio and with cash producing properties that the income comes from tenants. And so the property management company can easily make or break your investment. You want to make sure you're working with a very professional team. It's easy to become a property manager. You need to go get a real estate license. And, if you operate under a brokerage or you are a real estate broker, you can start a property management company. You can become a property manager. Doesn't mean that you know the ins and outs of finding tenants, qualifying tenants. You obviously need to have some knowledge of how to repair things around a home and what things cost and so on and so forth. So although I wouldn't say easy, but you can become a property manager by simply getting a real estate license, and you can practice property management. It doesn't mean that you are a professional property manager. And so I have identified 89 questions that you should ask every property management company before you determine that this is the right company to work with. And I've broken them down into some different categories. One would just be general info. 2, communication, lease terms, renewals, advertising, screening, and the lease up process, late fees, evictions, inspections, maintenance and repairs, vacancy and turnover, and finally fees. And so one thing I'm going to caution people when it comes to property management, don't go with the cheapest company or the company that has the lowest fees. If you're just shopping around for a company that has the lowest fees, you could be setting yourself up for disaster. Don't go with a bargain property manager. If they're offering very low fees, it's just that's their tactic to bring on doors. It's not their service. It's not their credibility. It's not their performance that are bringing on clients. It's a cheap fee. So I would be very wary of that. Do not go into hiring a property manager based on who's going to give me the lowest property management fee. No. Generally, if you're working with a company, the industry standard is about 10%. If someone's charging over 10%, I wouldn't go with them. I'd feel like that's too high. But the industry standard is 10%. I know at our property management company, American Real PM, we charge 8% in Texas and 10% up in Missouri. Because the rents up there are a little bit lower, so we charge 10% in that market. The rents are higher down here in Texas, so we give the investors a little bit of a break and charge 8%, so it kind of balances out. But if a company's charging more than 10%, I'd be wary. If a company's charging less than 8% or a flat fee, like some big conglomerate companies out there charge, I'd be a little wary of that for sure as well. Just because, like I said, it's they're discounting pricing just to bring on a high volume of doors, and it does not usually relate to a very passive experience or a very good professional experience with that type of company. And so that would be my advice there. But let's get into it. Let's start with general info. Number one, I'm going to want to know who the head of the company is. Now, with real estate investing and real estate in general, you need to know who you're working with. The team is very important. You need to know that you're working with a good team and a good person. So, I mean, anybody I do business with, I immediately will go online and, this is the 21st century. You can pretty much easily find out information on people unless they change their name, and that would be pretty shady as well. But I'm going to take it to the internet and I'm going to look this person up and see if there's any bad reviews on them. Do they have any negative publicity? Or they've been convicted of any type of fraudulent activity, anything like that. So I want to know who the head of the company is first and foremost. Then I'm going to want to know how long has the company been in business. Now, if it's a new company, but they have a lot of experience in the field, maybe it's somebody that's been managing properties for a long time, but then just now started their own property management company. I'm not going to really knock them if they're new, if the company's new. But if they have a lot of experience in property management and hey, they have a story, I just started the company, but I've been working with another company for 10 years. I have, 10, 20 years experience managing properties. I'll feel pretty comfortable with that. But I do ask that question. Obviously, if a company's been in business for a long time, they should have some reviews online. And be wary of the reviews on property management companies. A lot of times you'll have some upset tenants that are just, saying some negative things just because they're unhappy about something. They got charged something that's really their fault. But they're just unhappy with the property management company. So they're going to take it to the internet and start yelping. So I will give a break, though, on the company if they haven't been in business very long and I'm having a hard time finding out any reviews or any information on them. That goes back to, okay, who's the head of the company? What's the experience look like? How long have you been a property manager? And I will give you a break if you're still a relatively new company. An example is, when we started American Real PM, it was a new company in 2016. But American Real Estate Investments had been in business since 2011. And myself and my partner had been doing single family rentals since the early 2000s. So we have a ton of experience in dealing with single family rentals and tenants and renovating homes and things of that nature. We were just using a third party management company for a very long time to do so. But when we brought in our head of operations for our management company, he came with over a decade of experience. So although the company was new, he had over a decade of experience in multiple markets and also had worked with a very large property management company that had just recently sold for $60 million. At least that's the word on the street. So he came with a lot of experience. Number 3, I would ask how many units does the company manage? This goes back to, hey, if it's somewhat new, I understand if you don't have that many units just yet. But I think that's a very important question to ask. I also think that you should ask how many of those units are currently vacant. You want to make sure that this property manager is, keeping the property occupied, obviously, managing a good functional portfolio. So you have very low vacancy. That's all very important. Then I'd want to ask, who is my property manager? Who will be my property manager? I'd like to have a name of the person that's looking after my investment if I decide to go with this company. And then ask, will I have one specific property manager? Sometimes larger companies, they like to spread things out over multiple people. I like having one direct point of contact. So I want to know, do I have a specific manager that I will be able to speak with in case I have any questions or concerns about my property? How long has the property manager been a property manager? I think that's a very important question. That goes back to question number 2. If the company's been in business for only a short time, but the head of the company or the person managing my property has a lot of experience, I'd like to know how much experience that person has. How many units does my property manager manage? I think that to professionally manage single-family homes, you need to make sure that your property manager is not overloaded. Depending on the property class, C class, I would say, it's very difficult to manage more than 150, 200 properties as one property manager. With A class, I think you could get up into the 250 to maybe 300 range per manager. But obviously, they're going to need some help too. If a property manager is managing 150 doors to 300 doors themselves, they better have a pretty large infrastructure behind them. So I'd want to know what that infrastructure is. Okay, if a property manager is managing 250 doors, is he doing everything himself? The utility transfers, the leasing, dealing with the maintenance, dealing with the calls from the tenant. What does the infrastructure look like at that point? If you have a company that has departments for everything involved with property management, and employees that are a part of those departments, and then just one property manager overseeing everything, then I think you can provincially manage just as one manager up to 300 properties. If they don't have that in place, then I just can't see how that's even possible. I would also want to know, out of the units that my property manager specifically is looking after, how many of his properties are vacant? What is the shortest, longest, and average length that tenants stay in the same property? I think that that's a very, very good question to ask. What do you offer that sets you apart from other companies? For example, I think American Real PM, that's my management company. I think the thing that sets us apart from other management companies is we are very investor friendly. We run our company with limited fees, very simple to understand fees, no hidden fees. And, we strive for rent increases year over year, and, are always beating down bills and things of that nature to make sure that our investors are having a positive experience and are seeing positive cash flow year over year and month over month. So I think that that's very important. And I think that that's what sets my company apart from other property management companies out there who are just looking at you as a number on a screen and, a cash flow generator for them. And are not going to try and push rents up, and are not going to try to beat down bills and get multiple bids on high cost repairs and things like that. Whereas we do that because we know how important it is to provide our clients with, positive income each month. How is rent paid to the owner? I think that that's very important. We do an ACH. We'll do whatever you'd like, but most of our clients go with an ACH. But that's important to know. And then I'd also want to know, how do the tenants pay rent? Do you have an online portal system? Do you have an online system to where renters can easily go and pay their rent? I think that that's very, very important. And when is rent paid to the owner? When are these ACHs dispersed into my account? When should I expect to see that money each month? The next category would be communication. What do you expect from me as the owner in regards to communication? Do I have to reach out to you monthly for updates, or are you going to be reaching out to me? What are the expectations on me as being your client? I think that that's important, in setting proper expectations with the company and you as the client at the beginning of any business relationship. How often do you communicate with the owners? Some companies might tell you, well, we only reach out to the owners when something's gone wrong. Me as an owner, I like the passive approach. I don't really want updates all the time, but it would be nice to maybe receive a monthly update from the property manager, or at least a quarterly update if everything's going as according to plan, just to say, hey, everything's going good, but just touching base, just letting you know I'm keeping my eyes on your property. And, it's good. People like that warm and fuzzy feeling, and they like the fact that, the property manager is being proactive in terms of communicating with them and keeping lines of communication open. Do you provide the owner's information to the tenant? I think that that's a great question to ask. I believe any professional property management company will say, no, we don't, because the last thing we want, or I would want, is my tenants to have my personal cell phone or email, because then they're just going to go around the property manager and try and come to me for every issue that's going on with the home. And that's not why I hired a property management company and pay a monthly management fee. Do you have a policy about owners contacting the tenants? Most companies should. You don't want your owners talking to the tenants either. You don't want to create an open line of communication between you and the tenant. Then that will eliminate the third party of the property management company. You need that property manager in there as that buffer to protect you, and also make sure, that the tenant's property is in livable condition. And, there's that fine line that the property manager walks, but you want that property manager representing you as the owner. How often do you reach out to the owners? That's pretty much the same as like communicating with the owners, but, reaching out in terms of just to kind of say hi. Like I said, keep that open line of communication. So I just threw that in there again. Can you give me examples of how and when you would communicate various problems? That's a great question to ask, in my opinion, just because there's different problems that can arise with property management and eviction. Maybe it's just a maintenance request. whatever it may be. Like if it's a simple maintenance request, most property managers will probably just upload that to your portal, and you'll receive a notification through email to check your portal for a minor maintenance request that may need your approval. But something like an eviction is a more serious problem, so that should probably be a phone call. And if you don't answer, leave a voicemail and follow up with an email so you can have a phone conversation with this owner about this potential problem. Some problems are larger than others. I would like to know, hey, if it's a very severe problem, how are you communicating to me? If it's just a minor issue, how is that being communicated? What is your turnaround time on phone calls and emails from owners? I believe in what we practice here that the communication needs to be within 24 hours. If an owner calls, is not able to get in touch with their property manager, or sends an email, it is protocol that the property manager follows up within 24 hours. And I think that that's a good benchmark in terms of good communication with your property management company. Sometimes a property manager can be in the field, they're dealing with other stuff. So maybe they're not able to get their phone. Maybe they're in court and doing an eviction. You don't know. So they're not able to answer their phone, or they're not able to get to their email right away. But there really should be no excuse as to why you can't respond to somebody within 24 hours. And what is your turnaround time on phone calls and emails from tenants? If it's a professional property management company, you should probably have people on staff that are fielding calls from the tenants and fielding emails from the tenants around the clock, especially during business hours between 9 to 5. So I would say if it's something after business hours, after 5 p.m., that should be answered very early the next morning. So that shouldn't go 24 hours with the tenants. What if it's an emergency situation? Most professional management companies also have, an emergency line that would pick up 24/7. I think that that's very important in keeping the tenant safe and keeping the tenant happy, because we do want tenant retention. We want tenants to continue to renew the lease and eventually maybe sign long-term leases to earn their property long-term. We want to cut down on turnover, so we want to make the tenants happy. And obviously there's a careful balance. We don't want to abuse our owners by making the tenants too happy, and we want to do things within reason. Tenant-induced damage to the property needs to go back to the tenant. It should not be put on the owner. So, there's some property management companies out there that abuse their owners in my eyes because they take too much care of the tenant and don't think about the owner enough. That, in my opinion, is not an investor-friendly property management company. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into lease terms, the next category. But let's go to break right now, and we'll be right back on the Real Estate Cowboys.
Did you know there are 6 different ways real estate pays investors? Are you interested in getting started with real estate investing but just don't know how? Investing in real estate can be challenging, especially if you don't have the time, experience, or resources to do so. At American Real Estate Investments, they do all the hard work for you. They're a DFW-based company that buys homes in great neighborhoods, professionally renovates them, and places business professional tenants in your property. With their program, you can start earning headache-free passive income and equity growth from appreciating values in the fast-growing DFW market. There is no better place in America to invest in real estate today. To learn more about how their investors are earning up to 100% returns or greater with their program, give them a call at 888-323-AREI or visit their website at areiusa.com. That's 888-323-AREI or areiusa.com.
And welcome back to the Real Estate Cowboys. This is John Larson. We are talking about 89 questions that you should ask any property management company before you hire them. For time purposes, let's get right into it. The next category is lease terms. Who is the lease between?
The lease should be between the owner and the tenant. If it's anything different, that's a red flag to me. So lease should always be between the owner and the tenant. Next, you should ask, do you provide a copy of the lease to the owner? And if so, when?
Yes, you should always have a copy of the lease. And that usually, if it's a professional management company that operates on a online system, Propertyware, Appfolio, whatever it may be, when a lease is signed, a copy of the documents will be uploaded to the portal so the owner can see that. What lengths of lease do you offer? I think that that's also very important. It's a very important question to ask. You'll have some management companies that, only do year leases at a time. We like to push for 2-year leases at my company with a rent escalator in year 2. I think that that's very important because, we're in a market right now where property values are increasing as are rents. And so I think that you do need to try and get that escalator, even if it's a 2-year lease. But we push for 2-year leases. I want to cut down on turnover for my investors. This goes back to being an investor-friendly management company. But 1-year leases are fine. That's the actual bare minimum what that will do. And if an applicant is a solid applicant and they have a good reason as to only wanting to sign a 1-year lease, we will still potentially accept that 1-year lease. But we do push for 2 years. Do you do a breakout clause? What that would be like pretty much a break lease clause. And yes, we do. There is a penalty for breaking the lease early, unless it's for something like military duty, job relocation, and that tenant's going to have to back that up with proof for us to be able to release them from that lease with no penalty. If they just decide to break the lease and have no reason, can't provide any documentation, there is going to be a penalty for that. So you want to definitely ask your potential property manager, how does that look? Do you have a rental deductible? That would be like a security deposit. What do you charge for a security deposit? Our standard is 1 month's rent, but there might be an applicant that has a 550 credit score. It's a little bit lower credit score than what we'd like to see. In that case, we might ask for a 1.5 to a 2-month security deposit to mitigate that risk. Do you do sight unseen leases? If yes, do you have a special addendum? We don't do that, but that is a good question to ask potential property management companies. Who is responsible for pest control? When the property is occupied, we typically put that on the tenant. If it's not occupied, then the pest control is going to be on the owner. Who's responsible for lawn maintenance? That is also at our company. If the property is vacant, the owner is going to be responsible for the lawn maintenance. If the property is occupied, that's on the tenant. Who is responsible for maintaining the HVAC? We put in the lease, in our leases, that the tenants are supposed to change filters and all that sort of stuff while the property is occupied. If they don't, they're subject to lose that security deposit. But we also make sure we do routine checks about every 6 months on our properties, where our property manager is getting in for just a routine inspection and checking for, AC filters and things like that. Have they been changed? If the property is vacant, that's going to be on the owner, obviously, and the property manager is going to be taking a look at the property pretty consistently while the property is vacant before we get a new tenant in that home. Who's responsible for utilities? When it's vacant, usually it's always the owner. When it's occupied, usually it's always the tenant. Good question to ask, though. How much move-out notice do you require? At our company, we require 45 days. Many other companies may only require 30 days. It's good to know that so you have the right expectations, however. Renewals. Is the lease automatically renewable? That's a good question to ask. What is your renewal policy? Do you perform a market evaluation for every renewal? And how do you determine to raise the rent or keep it the same? Very good questions. In the Dallas market, since property values are increasing pretty rapidly and median household income has also been increasing year over year, we're generally charging 3%, $50 or $50 increase, flat $50 increase year over year on our homes. Eventually, you're going to get to a point where some of these neighborhoods, the rents have kind of plateaued. You can't really push them up anymore because you're talking about an area where the median income might only be $50,000 or $60,000. In order to qualify for our lease or to lease one of our homes, you need to make at least 3 times that monthly rent gross. There's going to get to a point where just some of these areas you just kind of plateau. You can't push it anymore, but we do actively push rents, and we are doing a comparative market analysis every time the property is up for renewal so we can show the tenant, hey, rents have been going up in this area. If you're going to renew, we have to adjust the rent. That's one of the investor friendly aspects of our company, and I think if you're an investor and looking for a property management company, that sort of stuff is important. You need to know that your property manager is trying to increase rent year over year because we know property taxes go up, expenses could potentially go up. So you need to account for that and increase rent year over year or every 2 years or whatever it may be. And you also don't want leases, in my opinion, automatically renewable. They go to month with us. There is an increased fee on the lease for going month to month. So that's another way that you can kind of generate some more rental income as the tenants may be exploring options and in that month to month period. Some tenants just like to go month to month. We don't really like to do that. The owner is able to get more rent when the tenants go month to month, but we really try and push them into another commitment because we don't want our owners in limbo, each month wondering, is my tenant going to move or stay? So we do a very good job, and I think any other company that you're interviewing, you need to make sure that they do a very good job at keeping the tenants renewed, locking them in for long-term leases if possible. So you have that assurance that your property is going to be occupied and cash flowing for years to come. Advertising, screening, and your lease up, how does that work? What is your advertising strategy? I think that's important. How do you get your properties out on the market for a lease? How many eyes are seeing these properties? You want to make sure that the property management company that you're working with is using all outlets to get your property leased. That's the best way to keep vacancies down and keep your property occupied consistently. Also on turnovers, you want to make sure that your property manager is marketing the heck out of that property so you can get a new tenant in there right away. And I think we do a very good job with that as well. Once we know a tenant's going to move out and they give us that notice, we already start actively marketing the property on our website and letting our investors know that, hey, this property is going to be available on this date. I mean, not our investors, sorry, potential tenants know that, hey, this property is going to be available on this date, and we'll do our best to try and get that property pre-leased. So when the previous tenant moves out, we can get in, perform the turn right away, and get that new tenant moved in. So we have a very low vacancy window for our owners. How do you determine the recommended rental rate? We have in-house real estate agents and brokers that lease our properties that run CMAs, comparative market analyses, and we know exactly what we're going to be. We have a great idea of what this property is going to be able to rent for, because the last thing you want to do is list it for too high. Properties in fast-growing markets like a Dallas and in Texas in general, they're going to lease fast unless they're in bad condition or overpriced. If they're in good condition and they're priced at or around what the market value is, what the market rent is in those neighborhoods, they're going to lease very quickly. Do you recommend any work be done to get top dollar? I think that's a good question to ask. Sometimes we do that. If we feel like, hey, your property is positioned in an area with a lot of, young business professionals or, higher income earners, I think you got to recommend sometimes to put in some granite countertops, at least in the kitchen, maybe in the bathrooms too, to command that higher rent. Maybe a nicer flooring as opposed to like a vinyl plank flooring. If the property's in a nicer neighborhood that's commanding higher rents and just commanding, higher earning tenants who want some nicer stuff, it might be better to put in some engineered hardwood flooring or something along those lines instead of vinyl plank flooring. Even things like just putting nice little handles on the kitchen cabinets, updating things like that can help you get some higher rent just because the property is more appealing. How long do you expect it to take to get a property rented out? I think that's a great question. What's your average vacancy period when there's a turnover? How long does it take to get the property back on market? That's a great question to ask. How quickly do you schedule showings and return calls? Great question to ask as well. I think you want to hear from your property management company that you're very responsive on any inquiries when it comes to potential tenants looking at your property, because obviously these properties don't work unless there's people living in the home willing to pay you rent. So you want to make sure that your property manager and their leasing agents are all over all inquiries that come in. The next question would be, how quickly does it take you to approve tenants and have a lease signed? Is that a long process? How does that process work? Typically with us, you're going to see an application come in through our website. We direct them through there, fill out the online application. Our team here reviews the application. We typically have an answer back to these individuals within 24 hours. So very quick, and you want to hear that, because the longer it takes, these potential tenants might just go and find another property. So you want to make sure your property management company is very much on top of that. What is your schedule for payments when installing a tenant? What does that look like? How quickly are you getting the security deposit in? When is the first month's rent due? So on and so forth. I think that that's important as well. How does that whole schedule look like when when onboarding a new tenant. What is your application and screening process? Many companies, almost all property management companies, charge an application fee. What does that application fee look like? If it's a company that charges too high on the application fee, I would be wary of that. That I think would scare potential tenants away. I believe our application fee is $50. That's typically the industry standard, and it's usually $50 per applicant. And you want to know what the screening process looks like. You don't want to be putting felons in the property, or people that have a ton of outstanding debts, or they have very low credit score, below 550, in my opinion, is very, very low. You also want to make sure that they have good rental history with previous landlords, so you want to double check on all that. So know the process through and through. And then that goes into what are your screening requirements. Know what the requirements are so you know what you're getting yourself into. You don't want property management companies that are just putting anybody in these homes. You want to take them through a very rigorous screening process, because these investments very much the success and failure relies on the type of tenant that's going to be placed in the property. Do you run the tenants by the owner before you approve them? Many of our tenants or owners, they just sign a power of attorney with us. They let us kind of handle that for them. They want the truly passive experience. You know, they know what the screening process is. They know that we're not going to take anybody that doesn't meet the screening process, and they give us that power of attorney to just place that tenant for them. But that's kind of how we make our model very passive and investor friendly. Other property management companies are probably running all applications by the owner first. Just know what that process looks like. What do you charge for your application process? Like I said, $50 is typically what we're charging, but know what that fee is. Late fees. What is your late policy? What is your late fee amount? Who keeps the late fees? If the fees are not collected from the tenant, will you still charge the owner for them? How many late payments does it take to have a fee assessed? What is your late policy? Typically, companies are after the 5th of the month, the late fee kicks in. What is your late fee amount? Most companies, I believe the late fee is probably $50, maybe $100. There also might be thresholds. You know, if it's late after the 5th, it's a $50 fee. If it's late after the 15th, it's a $100 fee. And then after that, it's eviction. Whatever it may be, know that process. Who keeps the late fees? Generally, you're going to see that the property management company keeps the late fees. It's a lot of work to try and go and collect this rent on behalf of the owner. Some companies may share the late fee with you as the owner. Just know how that process works as well. If the fees are not collected from the tenant, will you still charge the owner for them? That answer should be no. And how many late payments does it take to have a fee assessed? One late fee, is where one time missed or late rent accounts for a fee. Any professional management company should have what the late fee structure is clearly stated in the property management agreement and also the lease agreement with the tenant. Evictions. How many evictions did you perform last year? Typically with lower class properties, C and D class properties, you're probably going to see a much higher volume of evictions. When you get into high B to A class inventory, you're probably not doing as many evictions. So I would know, what does a portfolio look like? What is this portfolio that you're managing? Is it comprised mostly of C investments? Is it comprised mostly of A investments? And then understand, if a property manager's managing 500, 1,000 C-class doors, they're going to have evictions. If it's somebody that's managing primarily A-class doors and they still have high evictions, I'd be concerned. That tells me that they're not putting in the right tenants. Their screening process is not up to snuff. It's not where it should be. So it's a great question to ask, though, is how many evictions have been performed? How do you handle the eviction process? Is the eviction part of the cost or is it additional costs? Those are all great questions to ask too. Like at our company, we only charge a property management fee, a lease fee, and a renewal fee. We don't charge fees for evictions and things like that. To go to court for an eviction, there's no fee with that. We handle that. It's included. But many other management companies will charge for an eviction or charge to go to court. You got to look for those hidden fees in the property management agreement. Inspections. Do you do pre-inspection prior to the tenant move in or out? I think that's very important. The property manager needs to have eyes on these properties as much as possible. You want to make sure that the house is safe, that it's up to our standard. that there's nothing broke, nothing leaking, nothing like that. So I think it's very important to do a pre-inspection prior to the tenant moving in. And then obviously you do an inspection when the tenant moves out to assess any damage or anything that needs to be done. And you can assess how much money from the security deposit you can apply to that. How often do you do inspection during the tenant's term? I think it's important not to bug the tenant too much. If they're paying their bills, not making maintenance requests, it's good to just kind of leave them be. But I do think it's pretty smart to do a biannual inspection of the property just to kind of get your eyes on how things are looking. How do you document the inspection? Do you send it to the owners? Yes. That should be yes anyway. What forms do you use for the move-in, move-out inspection? Most property management companies are going to have a list of things that they check on the move-in and move-out inspection. So they should be able to provide that to you upon request. Do you take video and pictures? I think that's a great question to ask. I want to see videos and pictures of my move-out inspection. So when a property manager says, hey, you need to replace this, and this, you need to paint this wall, you need to replace this carpet, well, I want to see some photo and video documentation of that. And I think that that's not a big request at all. And what is your criteria for what you put down on the forms? Just, I think that's a great question to ask as well. If a wall has a few scuffs on it, are you saying, hey, the whole room needs to be painted, or is this touched up paint? What does that look like? All right, we're going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, we have a few more categories that we're going to run through. We still have security deposit, tenant damages. We still have maintenance and repairs, vacancy and turnover, and then finally fees. So let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll finish off with those last few categories.
Looking to complete a 1031 tax-deferred exchange and are needing financing for your replacement properties? Let Graham Parham at Highlands Residential Mortgage guide you through the process and make your 1031 exchange go smoothly and on time. As a seasoned investor, Graham owns several investment properties himself, and he can share with you the best way to plan your exchange. Graduate into a better property or properties and make use of leverage to obtain better cash flow and higher returns on investment. Highlands Residential Mortgage has one of the best in-house loan processes to deliver your loan on time and without any surprises. We are 1031 exchange friendly. Call Graham's toll-free direct number today at 855-326-6802 for your free mortgage consultation, or visit us online at texasinvestorloans.com. Highlands is an equal opportunity lender, NMLS 195724, located 1201 North Central Expressway, Dallas, Texas 75234. Highlands Residential Mortgage, NMLS 134871, is not a financial advisor.
And welcome back to the Real Estate Cowboys. We are talking about 89 questions you should ask any property management company before you hire them. We are on to security deposit tenant damages. How do you handle the security deposit? Where is it held? I think is a great question to ask. It should be held in an escrow account at the property management company. How do you charge for tenant damage during their lease term? I think that's a great question to ask as well. If a tenant breaks something in a house, that should go back on the tenant. It should not go back on the owner. And the property manager should do a good job of training tenants to understand that, hey, if your child breaks something, it's not going to go back on the owner. It's going to go on you, and set that expectation early with the tenant. If the tenant has damages that exceed the security deposit, do you come up with the documents and pursue the tenant? Do you take them to collections? I think that's a good question to ask. I know we do. All professional management companies should be doing that. When do you return the security deposit? I think it's pretty much standard in law that it needs to be returned within 30 days after the tenant moves out of the property. If there is no damage and no reason to take any money from the security deposit, or even if you take some of the money from the security deposit to fix some things that are not normal wear and tear, you still have to send the remainder to the tenant within 30 days. Do you get approval from the owner first? Yes, of course. That answer should be yes. Do you have lease language that requires the tenant to pay for any damage that they cause that is not wear and tear? That's a great question, and that should be in the lease, yes. Just a great way to protect the owner, so I think that's a very important question to ask. Next category, maintenance and repairs. Do you require a maintenance deposit for each property? That's usually what we would call, most management companies are going to call that just like a threshold that they'll escrow, $300, and any repairs under $300 they're just going to go ahead and fix that with the money that you hold in escrow for that property. I like that because I want it to be a passive experience. I don't need to hear about a $50 repair. I would just prefer, the management company just goes ahead and takes care of it and keeps the tenant happy. I want that passive experience, but some owners might want to hear about everything. And you will hear about it with my company. It goes in the portal, tells you what was repaired, shows you an invoice for it, and just lets you know, hey, it was a $50 charge or a $100 charge. And then we just keep that account replenished, so it's always at $300 just in case there's a minor repair. Do you charge a markup fee for maintenance? That should be no, in my opinion. We don't charge that. We work that stuff up with the contractors and our in-house people on staff, our in-house maintenance staff. We don't charge any upcharges for maintenance. And if it's something like an HVAC person or something like that, we'll negotiate with something on them on the back end, to where it's no inflated pricing to the owner to get something replaced. It just kind of is a deal with the contractor where, hey, we're going to send you a lot of work. I need you to give us a discount on that work. And, we can be paid through that discount or whatever it may be. Just know how that whole system works. I don't think you should have to pay an upcharge for maintenance. I know there's some management companies that charge for that, for coordinating the maintenance. I would be wary of that. I would kind of steer clear of that. Do you get multiple bids? If so, how many bids and at what threshold? Definitely should be getting multiple bids on high cost repairs. A drain breaks, foundation issue, window replacement, roof replacement, things of that nature should come with multiple bids. Is your maintenance in-house or third-party vendors? I doubt management companies keep all maintenance in-house. They're definitely using third-party vendors for specialty things like foundation, like HVAC, possibly even roof replacement. But the little minor maintenance should, in my opinion, be done in-house, and we have like a handyman staff that handles that stuff. That's how we're able to keep costs down for the owner. But that's a great question to ask. How do you handle off-hour emergencies? I kind of already went over this, but any management company should have, a professional management company should have a 24-hour service, because you never know what could happen. A pipe could burst in the middle of the night. You need to make sure that tenant's safe, and that issue is being taken care of right away, because if it's left untouched, it can cause a lot of excess damage and a lot of excess costs to the owner. What do you consider emergencies? I think that's a good question to ask your property management company. What is an emergency maintenance request? How does that look? Do you ask permission of owner or just fix and bill? If it's an emergency thing like a burst pipe or something like that, I want that stuff just fixed right away. Bill me later. I need it fixed immediately. Don't wait on my response. That's my opinion. I've done thousands of homes, over 1,000 myself. If you leave things unattended, it could cause a lot more damage and a lot more, it could hurt your pocketbook a lot more. So I want my property manager to be very proactive with emergency situations, fires, things like that. I mean, yeah, you got to be all over that stuff. What are the largest and smallest and average annual repair costs for a single family property over the past 3 years? I think that's good to know. What are your small little knick-knack stuff that happens? What are the large things that happen? What is the annual that you're seeing across the portfolio? If your property manager has been in business for a while and are managing a good number of doors, they should have that information readily available. What was the reason for the largest repair costs? Hey, let's just throw it out there. The largest repair costs you saw this past year, what was it and what was the reason? Do you troubleshoot with your tenants when they call for repairs? That answer should be yes. Definitely want to make sure, if it's something like a thermostat's not working, change the batteries. I mean, there could be easy fixes for a lot of the stuff. Let's get into vacancy and turnover. How much time between tenants do you leave? I would want to know, what is the average turnover time frame? Some cities make you go through municipality inspections and occupancy inspections. Like St. Louis is like that. Every time the property changes hands, the city needs to get in for an inspection. So that can slow up turnover times. That can slow up getting the property released, and can increase your vacancy time frame on turnovers. So I think that's a great question to ask. What has been your shortest, longest, and average vacancy over the past 12 months? Like I said, if this company's been in business for a while and manages a decent amount of doors, that should be very easy information to provide. What was the reason for your longest vacancy? hey, if there's a vacancy for 3 months, just tell me why. What was the problem? Did it take a while to get the owner to fund the turnover? If there was extra cost that was associated with the turnover, what was it? Just let me know. Do you show the property while the current tenant is in the property? In some cases, yes. If the tenant tells us, hey, I'm giving my 30-day notice, yeah, we can start showing that property at that point to new potential tenants. Do you have a termination clause if it is not rented after so many months? That's a great question to ask. I'd just throw that out there. Hey, if your property manager isn't doing their job and getting your property leased for you, do you have a way to get out of that property management agreement with no penalty? Finally, we're going to go to fees. This is important, but like I said, don't make the fee structure, your ultimate decision on what property management company to go with. I think that fees are important. You obviously don't want to overpay. Like I said, 10% is the industry standard. If someone's charging more than that, I'd be wary of it. But hey, if someone's charging 10% and I like the answers that they gave me on these previous 80 questions that I asked, I'm probably going to hire them because it seems like they got, good practices in order, proper infrastructure, and seem very professional. I don't mind paying a company like that 10%. What does the monthly fee include? Do you have any additional charges or fees? I definitely read that property management agreement thoroughly. Give it to your lawyer, whatever. Have them read that so you're seeing if there's any hidden fees or anything like that, so you're in the know about that sort of stuff. Don't work with a management company that has a property management agreement that's riddled with fees. That's going to just set you up for disaster. What does my monthly charge not cover? That's a good question too. So if property's vacant, you're not paying a management fee with my company, and most property management companies should operate like that. If the property's not generating income, you should not pay a management fee. But then that also means, like I said, you're paying for the lawn maintenance. The property management company, we will still coordinate all that sort of stuff, but you're paying for the lawn maintenance. You're just not paying us a property management fee while the property's not occupied. Some companies may charge you a property management fee when it's occupied or vacant, though. Know what that is. Do you charge for renewals? So that's renewing leases. Some management companies do not do that. We do charge a small fee. I think it's a quarter month's rent for a renewal. And we do that just because we want to keep our leasing agents incentivized to keep tenants in the property too. And the only way to incentivize them is to compensate them. If we weren't giving them any sort of compensation to work to try and keep the tenants in place, they would just let the tenants move out so they can collect a full month's leasing fee or whatever it is. So I think that that's very important to know. Who keeps the fees that the tenant pays? And does the owner pay any fees when the property is vacant? That was a question that I just, or one of the answers that I just gave you. If the property is vacant, you should not pay a property management fee, but obviously maintenance that goes along with maintaining the property, that's not going to be on the owner. These are all good questions. These are very thorough questions. We'll have a copy of this questionnaire on the Real Estate Cowboys DFW website. Go to realestatecowboysdfw.com to download a copy of all these questions so you can easily send these out to any prospective property management companies. And maybe you don't want to ask all these questions. 89 questions is pretty intimidating. But I think, you just got to know your stuff. You got to know good questions to ask these property management companies and keep them on their toes and make sure that you're hiring the right company. Like I said, do not make the mistake of just hiring a company because they have cheap fees. Make sure that this company has the proper infrastructure in place, has the right knowledge in place, has the right experience in place to professionally manage your investment. I say this all the time, that I could produce the best property, do the best renovation in the best neighborhood, in the best market, but if I have a poor property management company looking after the investment, it will fail. So I hope you found this information useful. For those of you who are interested in learning more about passive real estate investing, go to our website, therealestatecowboysdfw.com. Download our investor starter package, passive income starter package. Take our investor quiz if you're not sure what option works best for you. We have private lending opportunities for high fixed rate, double-digit returns. Great options for our IRA and 401k crowd. Single-family rentals, take advantage of Fannie Mae financing. Leverage 80% of the purchase of these homes. We have those options and information on that. And also vacation rental opportunities in beautiful Belize and in the Caribbean. Great options there as well. So if you're not sure what you are interested in and want to get started, or you're already an investor and want to explore some of these opportunities in Texas or Missouri or Belize, go to realestatecowboysdfw.com, put in your information, join our mailing list, get first right of refusal on all these great opportunities that are upcoming, learn more about these great opportunities. And once again, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Real Estate Cowboys. I hope you found this information helpful, and I will see you next week. Have a great week.
All opinions expressed by the hosts of the show are the opinions of American Real Estate Investments, LLC, and do not reflect the opinions of guests or sponsors. No personal or professional advice heard on this program should be considered an endorsement to follow a real estate financing or investment strategy. Before acting on any information, seek advice from your financial, tax, mortgage, or real estate advisor, as the information is not guaranteed and investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss.